Good afternoon. My name is Eric Sturgis. I'm the education editor at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and we are excited today for you to join us for this session that we're having called The Big Decision. But first, we'd like to thank you for subscribing to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Your support makes everything we do possible. In addition to the great journalism that we provide you every day, we offer you live events like today's conversation. These bring you inside the newsroom to meet our reporters and go deeper on some of our biggest stories and topics. Today's session will go for about 30 minutes. You can also drop questions in the chat box on your screen. We'll get to them at the end. I'll turn the conversation now to Maureen Downey, our education columnist, and we'll take your questions later in the session. Take it away, Maureen.
Welcome, folks. This is going to be a great panel. I am delighted that you're here, and I'm delighted so many of you sent questions in advance. I'm going to introduce our panel, and we're going to get started talking about getting into college, who should go to college, where should they go. We are joined today by a very impressive trio. Rick Clark is the Assistant Vice Provost and Executive Director of Undergraduate Admission at Georgia Tech, and Rick is the author of the book, The Truth About College Admissions, and I've written about his book, and we're going to link to it in the chat, so please look. I am delighted to welcome Dr. Pamela Ellis. She helps families navigate the college process through her company, Compass College Advisory. And she too has written a book, and her book is called What to Know Before They Go, College Edition. As a researcher herself, she's looked at the transition from high school to college, as well as African American males in education. So again, great expertise. And finally, our guests include David Graves, Senior Associate Director of Operations for UGA Admissions. And what that means is that he oversees the review and selection of freshmen and transfer applicants. And David Graves also runs the incredibly popular UGA Admissions blog. Welcome. And we're going to start right off with Rick. So Rick, my first question to you is that when we talked about your book and when I've talked to you, you've said that the question for high school seniors should not be, where are you going to college next year? But a question that you think is more important, why do you want to go to college? And I wonder, though, is that a question a 17 or 18-year-old can even answer?
Well, I mean, first of all, thanks so much for putting this panel together and looking forward to the conversation. I would say absolutely yes. I just think it's a question that too few are asked. You know, so many students who are succeeding academically and are showing promise are encouraged, and that's a positive thing, by teachers or supporting adults around them to go to college. But often the question from those people, who are all well-intentioned, is, well, where are you going to go? Or let me suggest some places that you should go because of here's what I see in you. What an academic interest or some kind of an outside the classroom interest or possibly a career aspiration. But I do think it's so important for students to ask that question of why, because the truth is we bombard them with information. Colleges do, especially talented students, and filtering through all their choices and options, there has to be some way to do that. And I really think solidifying a why is so important. It comes back around in the spring too, because the thing kids are stressed about now and parents are stressed about now is like, will I have any choices or options? And the spoiler alert is yes, they're going to get in several places. And then they're going to have to be stressed about like making a decision. And the why comes back there too is super helpful. Let me be reminded of what my goals really are. So I would say, yes, they can answer it. It's just upon the adults in the room and around them to ask them better questions.
Thanks. That's a great answer. And Pamela, I listened to a couple podcasts, and you actually also address this on your website. A parent asked you how much should they be involved in scheduling college visits for unmotivated students. And your answer kind of surprised me. You say your teen owns the college admissions process. But honestly, all the parents I know are very involved in that. It becomes sort of their second job. Is that not a good tack?
Thanks again, Maureen, for this great conversation. And it goes back to what Rick just shared about the student having a why. And I know that sometimes that why might be different than what the parent has. And at the end of the day, to really avoid a lot of the stress that comes with this whole process and a lot of the nervousness around the choice that students make later, it's important that they do own the process. And I'm a fervent believer that when parents let go, that's when their teen actually will step up and take on the role of actually learning about the colleges. And I don't believe that any parent should know more about that college than the teen does, because they're the ones that will be going, and you want them to be in a place where they're going to thrive. And if they're not engaged with that process, or even taking part in really getting to know, what their why is and why that college is a fit for them, then I think it's just going to make for more regret later. And so that's why it's really, important that parents do allow their teen to own the process. And it gives them that time to prepare, just by letting go, and for them to use those skills of independence, self-advocacy that they're going to be using when they go to college. But I think it'll make for them really thriving in a way that is going to just warm their heart and make for a better relationship that they will have.
Thank you. Another great answer. David, whenever UGA sends out its admissions notifications, and of course, some of them will come as early as Thanksgiving with early action, my emails start. And this is the email I get. My kid had a great SAT, ACT score. They were 3.8. They did everything. They were practically a sword swallower in the circus. Why didn't UGA admit them? And it's hard sometimes when I look at those profiles to make sense of who gets into UGA and who doesn't. Can you make sense of it for us?
It's hard to make sense, only because, and one of my recent admission blogs, I talked about just the size and scope of things. And how, if you are staying in the middle of, Sanford Stadium here on UVA's campus, and you look at the north stands and the west stands, that's the entire applicant pool is 40,000 plus. Rick's probably going to be 55,000 plus this year. We're going to enroll maybe 6,000, and so you're talking about that we'll probably admit maybe 14, 15 plus thousand of those. Out of 40,000 plus, you're talking about a lot of applicants, a lot of strong applicants, and in early action, many times you have to say, we have to be careful, because we know that while we'll get 20,000, 22,000 in early action, we're going to get 20,000 to apply regular decision. And we don't know what that, but when we're making early action decisions, we don't know what that last 20,000 plus is going to be like. So we have to be very careful. So one, it's going to be, if you're applying to a strong university, one, you're applying to a university that is academically strong, and the student body is academically strong. That's a good thing, but it also means you've got some real competitiveness as far as in strength of those applicant pools, and that's a give and take. But really, it's just going to be one. It's a strong applicant as all overall. A lot of students are fitting into that really good applicant range. And then early action, it's everybody just has to be a little careful. You don't want to have an oops moment. And so you're like, okay, we wanted 6,000 freshmen and we've got 7,000, or you wish that you had not admitted this many students in early action because you got some amazing ones in regular decision. So I try and tell students, look at the larger picture. Look at it as a early action versus regular decision is maybe day one versus day two of an audition for something. And that we have to understand and make good decision of the entire pool. We can only do a part of that in early action. And as well, while I know everybody does it. I mean, when my children were playing sports, we used to say, well, my kid's better than that kid and he's starting or whatever. It's hard to really do that because one, you might not know everything about the other applicants, but also everybody has that little bit of a personal bias for their own child or grandchild or great grandchild. I mean, we hear everything that you have to sort of say, let me take a step back from that and look at it and know, when schools post their averages, those are pretty impressive. And it's not just on a few kids, it's on a lot. And they just have to know that, we have to make some tough decisions. Everybody has to make tough decisions at times, and we just have one that impacts a few more. I could ramble on for more, but I'll stop because I know more questions are out there. So,
Rick, I'm back to you. Let's get practical now.
All right.
Okay, we're talking to a high school senior. It's October 5th. Where should that student be in the college application process?
Well, I mean, that's going to be your classic admission answer of it depends. It does depend a lot on that student and the places that they're interested in applying. So it is true, though, here in Georgia, as an example, that both UGA and Georgia Tech have early action deadlines that are coming up pretty soon. And a lot of the rest of our system, a lot of the other publics, as well as many of the privates, either already are on like a rolling admission basis and they're accepting applications and beginning to put out decisions, or they also have early action decision or early decision in the case of Emory and a couple other privates in our state. So if a student at this point is looking to go to college in the state of Georgia, I would say they are in the point where they've started their application. They've got at least a solid first draft of their essay, if that school in fact requires an essay, and that they have absolutely talked with any teachers as well as their counselor who they're asking to write recommendations, because all of this, right, works off you sort of back map it or reverse engineer it from the deadline. And so at the 2-week out mark, if you've written a solid draft, you've still got time to revisit it, to have someone else look it over, to rethink and kind of step away. That's fine. You've had an opportunity to go in and put down the things you've been involved with and revisit that and ask somebody else to do it. In fact, that's one thing I would say on a very practical standpoint, I think is a misstep or a mistake that students make is they will be pretty quick to have someone else look over their short answer or their essays, but they rarely ask somebody else to look over their entire application. And I think that is worth doing in order to just basically simulate the way it's actually read in the admission office, right? Having somebody look at the entire thing and then ask them questions. Well, maybe you forgot this, or did you think about, phrasing something this way, or what about X that you did, or, et cetera. So I would say that's where students should generally be. Now, maybe they're not interested in applying early action. Maybe they feel like for one reason or another, the school that they're very interested in has a later deadline and they want this academic semester to be kind of strong, and they want to put their best, they believe putting their best foot forward means waiting until the fall grades come in. Well, in that sense, then they don't need to be exactly where I just stated. But I would say for a lot of students, especially applying to publics in Georgia, they should be app open, created, and moving forward to a certain extent.
And to remind folks out there, I believe the early admission deadline for both Tech and UGA is October 15th. So that is 10 days from now. Pamela, another practical question. When should students visit college? How many should they visit? And is a campus tour enough? I've been on so many campus tours and they all sort of blend together, honestly. They're always led by chipper students. That's all I can tell you.
Yes, that's so true. I think the best time to visit is in the spring of junior year. And for seniors now, I don't want them to be panicked about it, because the next time they can visit would be as an admitted student. And I think that there has to be some, level of sanity in this whole process. And so I don't want seniors feeling like they need to go out and start visiting campuses. If there are a campus or two that's in their local area that, they want to visit, I think it's important to do so from the standpoint of completing their supplemental essays, if they have any, in terms of why this college. They do want to show that they know something about that college. And I think that the campus visit can help with that. I think it's very important as far as the overall process, but there is a timing, if you will, in terms of when it makes sense as part of the entire process. And so I say, spring of junior year is ideal. And then in the summertime, right before senior year, if there's time. And then the most important visit would be that admitted student visit, because just, seeing it as an admitted student is going to be very different than seeing it any other time. And that's really when the decision is made.
Good answer. David, I'm combining a reader question with my own question. I'm going to read the reader's version first. Do high school students have to take advanced placement, IB, or dual enrollment courses to have a competitive application? How are students that take and do well in regular courses perceived in the application process? My question was on AP and IB, but mine was more, should students take, if their school offers AP or IB, should students take that, or should they take dual enrollment? There's a great deal of debate about that, particularly since the kids who do, who take dual enrollment tell me it's easier actually than IB or AP for them, because it's often intro college courses. So complex question, but there you go.
That's a big question.
Big question.
All right. I'll try and cut it into a couple of different things. One, it depends upon the context of the situation. So there are certain students that don't have access to AP or IB and can only take dual enrollment. If you're visiting certain schools in South Georgia, North Georgia Mountains, et cetera, where you're not going to have as large of an institution of a high school, not as many options sometimes, we're saying, let's look at what you've done within the context of both your high school curriculum and the community curriculum as far as within dual enrollment. The second part is really, we want students to be prepared for college courses. And so that means challenging yourself. At different colleges, that can mean different things as far as both what the competitiveness of the applicant pool is, but also maybe what stage they're at. And I am fine with students taking AP, IB, dual enrollment. All of those are fine. It depends upon both the courses chosen and what their options are. I mean, IB is a very limited program that, as far as number of schools offering it, but it's also a very a huge commitment, because you're talking about going and say, I'm doing all IB. And so you might have to give up some secondary options as far as courses you take or activities. And that's a challenge, but it's a great program. But that's the one where it's just, you got to choose where you want. That's more of a discussion with the counselor and the family. As far as AP and dual enrollment, yes, we want you to be challenging yourself, especially in the areas where you are looking at a major. UGA does not admit to a specific major. You can change your major after you're admitted. But we are saying, if you are interested in engineering, probably you should be strong in the STEM areas, among other things. And if you're doing, my son, he's a Georgia Tech grad engineer, and he took dual enrollment multivariable calculus through Georgia Tech. And that was a beast. So Ricky was prepared, but it was a beast. Whereas college algebra we don't even teach that at UGA. So it's more about, what are you wanting to do? What classes are you taking to get yourself prepared for the next 3, 4, whatever years? And we are okay how you do that, however you do that. Most of the students who apply both to Georgia Tech and Georgia are going to be taking honors classes and advanced classes as far as AP, dual enrollment, IB. So for us, it's going to be, you should be challenging yourself to that level, only because, one, you want to be prepared for the rigors, but two, because the other applicants are as well. We don't have a certain number. There's not a number. You should do 8, 7, 4, whatever. It's more, you should just say, how can I prepare myself best for my next steps? Hopefully that's answered. And dual enrollment's a financial question as well. There's certain students where makes sense to do dual enrollment in Georgia because it's free up to a certain number, 10 classes roughly. That's a great option. And I'm not going to tell a student, oh, no, don't do that because I like AP better. If it's a great financial option and you can challenge yourself and prepare yourself, do it. So.
Okay, thank you. That is a complicated question. Rick, I'm giving you a complicated question too.
Okay.
And that is, in my last 25 years of reporting on education, we are seeing more and more where experts are saying it isn't just getting a college degree anymore that assures you a good job and a good life. Now it's field of study. There's great variation in the kind of pay and the kind of money you will earn in the US now based on what you studied in college. So do you think that you folks in the admissions business should be telling students that, for example, I looked this up, a tech grad in computer and information services 3 years after graduation is almost at $111,000 a year. Now, the Georgia Tech kid who graduated in radio, television, and digital communications, closer to my heart, but that person is going to be making $69,500 in 3 years. Should tech be explaining that to students when they come there, that a tech degree is great, but a tech degree may be greater depending on what you choose to study at tech?
I would say yes. I mean, first of all, coming out of the Great Recession, so rewinding all the way back to 2008, 9, 10, there's no doubt that America really started to wake up and look at ROI, return on investment, and the value of a college degree in a different way. And I would say largely that was positive. When it gets overly quantified, maybe not, but having colleges accountable, right, for graduation rates and retention rates, and even to an extent opportunities when they finish career-wise is a good thing with the amount of money that we're asking families to invest in a college education. I do think that the system, actually the university system of Georgia, and we could probably find this link and put it in there, has done some of this work for us recently. So under Chancellor Perdue, they actually have produced a link that allows you to look at each individual institution and the major, as well as starting salaries, I believe, maybe even mid-career earnings. So I believe the answer is yes, that it's incumbent upon schools to talk about outcomes and to explain differential outcomes based on, not only institution to institution, but also major to major. At the same time, I think the important thing for helping students understand, like, we're trying to set you up for choices and options. And really, when we talk to parents, this is a big thing too about college admission, is the goal should not be, I don't think, to have your picture taken in front of a certain arch or a certain statue or a certain, bumper sticker on your car. Like, as parents for our kids, what we want most is that they have choices and options. And you should coach and parent and partner with your kids towards that end. Similarly, I think that's what colleges should do, is if you come here, be that Georgia Tech, UGA, or any other school, here's what we can promise you. We're going to set you up with an education, a network, and career experiences while you're in college so that you will be in control of making your own choices when you're finished, right? I think that is, at the end of the day, what the outcomes and the return on investment really is all about. So it's largely a yes to your answer, with a little bit of an asterisk around that.
Pamela, I want to come to you on a big question that parents have. As a result of COVID, many schools made the college admissions test, the ACT or the SAT, optional, including the public campuses now in Georgia, with the exception of UGA and Georgia Tech. What do you advise students about taking those tests?
What I advise them about taking the test is, first of all, thinking about which test is going to be the best one for them, because all of the colleges will take either or. And I say, doing a full length practice to see, do you like ACT better, or does SAT fit better with you? And so I really, believe strongly it starts with that teen in that regard as well. And then once that decision is made, really looking at, taking the test, perhaps doing it once or twice, And from there, making the decision around whether or not they feel proud of those scores and that they represent, who they are. And then depending on, again, the colleges that they're applying to, how competitive would that score be if they submitted it? And, this is where I think that there is, some confusion around the term test optional, because it just means that, no, you don't have to send it in. But if you do, we'll look at it. And so in those cases where they will look at it, they can't unsee it. And so is this, the score that you would want them to see, and making the decision that way. And I don't think that every student, has to take it, because if there is some test anxiety or, it's just not a good fit, for them to take it for whatever reason, don't. Because there are still a lot of options where there are great colleges, out there where they absolutely don't have to submit any scores at all. And so that's what I advise around the testing. And Steer, there's a lot of questions about it, even in these last few years.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. It's a good answer. I hate to give you a hard question again, David, but this one just came in. So I think it's a good question. So I'm going to read it, just typed in. Your thoughts on advancing the college exploration and application process when your child is just hitting academic stride in the 11th grade. They may not understand now that some of the schools they wanted to go to might not be accessible because of the impact of their pandemic on their performance. So the greater question to me is, a lot of parents have told me their kids lost their way during the pandemic. And some of them even worry they're not ready for college due to what they missed. What do you advise people about that?
Yeah, thanks for the tough question. So what I would say is, we know that students have been impacted throughout the nation. I mean, I doubt there's a single student who hasn't had some challenges because of any number of issues related to the pandemic. Most students that apply to UGA, probably at Tech as well, have used the Common App that's become so ubiquitous that, and it does have an area on there that says, talk about if, communicate with us if you have had challenges due to COVID. Some it's just going to be, well, I had to take classes online. Welcome to the world. But others, it might be a little bit more challenging. So one, I'd say, share that, but know that everybody has had certain challenges. But if there's extenuating circumstances, definitely let us know more. But for someone who might feel that the last year or so might not show the real strength of what they feel their potential is, I generally say apply, if you have the option, apply regular decision. A good example would be early action versus regular decision at Georgia. There's not a difference in the review process, it's a timeline process. And if a student isn't ready to apply yet by October 15th, they're not ready to say, hey, look at my application, because either they want a later test score, they want fall grades, which this student probably, I'd say, wait until you have fall grades in for us to initially look at it. So maybe it can be, now I'm back on track. Or they just don't have time sometimes. Fall is busy for some students. If it's, hey, I've got a fall sport and I'm in the play, etc. If you don't have time to put in a strong application now, wait. It's okay. I mean, we're talking difference in early action versus, if you really are wanting to go to, X college and they have early decision, that's a different world. But for us, it's not in that sense. But also try and put yourself, like Pamela had said, do you see that this will help you, put you in the best light, show what you really might be able to do? Having those fall semester grades of your senior year might help this student say, here's what I'm really like. A good example is there's a number of students who ninth grade might not be their best year. They're coming in from middle school. The transition was tough, but now they blossomed in 10th and 11th, and so many times admissions offices will look at not only grades, but grade trends. How have you done over the cycle of 3.5 years? How have you done when you're starting to get into those real challenging classes? And we try and take that into account. And so hopefully that might help this student as well. I can't really say, part of it I think was, where is it? Unrealistic expectations. I'm not going to jump into that part. You just have to be honest with yourself more than anything else, as far as where you're applying to. If you're applying to a place that has, 5% are going to be admitted as far as the applicant pool, you're in the 95. You could be in the 95 pretty easy. If you're rolling dice at Vegas, you're not saying, let me ride on that 5%. Go into the situation knowing what the odds might be more than anything else. Again, there's a lot of students applying and a lot of really good applicants. Just understand that is what I would always say.
Okay.
Maureen, if I can just say one thing there. I mean, this is true at UGA. It's also true at Georgia Tech and many schools across our state in particular is, and something I'm really thankful for, and I feel like is a strength of our system is, it's not a one and done proposition. So I didn't read the full question there, but I can speak for us. This year, 27%, so over 1 out of every 4 of our new students are transferring into Georgia Tech. And 1 out of every 5 of our May graduates did not start here. And when we're making admission decisions for transfer students, it is purely based on the work you've done in college. And so I think that's really important for families to know, is that, sure, look, if UGA is my really my goal and my dream school, then they put out an application in that first year review, and it may or may not work out, as David just said, but it's not a closed door entirely. There might be a pathway to UGA, a pathway to Georgia Tech, a pathway to another school around our state. And that's a really good thing. In fact, there's many schools that both these two institutions cross over with, where that kind of is true. If you don't get in coming straight out of high school, there's really not a lot of hope beyond that. And I feel like we've done a good job in our system of expanding access to students by saying you might come in a different door, but you'll ultimately go off the same stage at the end. And that's important for people to understand that that's viable.
Okay. I want to remind listeners to use the Q&A button, please, to ask questions. And now, Rick, you kind of saved yourself, because I'm going to give your question to Pamela.
All right, sounds good.
And it's kind of a complicated question also. What I'm hearing from teachers in high school and even college professors is that kids are coming in with greater mental health burdens. They're coming in expecting more leeway, more compassion. And professors feel in some cases that they're asking the schools, the colleges want them to go easier on the kids. Do you think that students that you're working with now who have been through the pandemic are really ready for college rigor and ready for the fact that many colleges, it's sink or swim? I mean, there are services to help you, but no one's knocking on the door to help you. You have to find your way there.
Whew. Yeah, that is a tough one. I definitely do think that we're seeing a lot more mental health issues, and the actual process, I think the college admissions process sometimes exacerbates that. And, some students that I see feel like, because they've always grown up thinking that it's college, that they're not looking at some of these other alternatives in terms of things that they could do in the way of a bridge or gap year, to just take that time off, take that time for themselves, whether it's travel, whether it's getting a job, getting some employment experience, that's also a very viable option. And again, there are a lot of colleges that do offer support. And while they may not all, reach out to the students to let them know that support is there, it's really on the student to self-advocate, to seek out those services and take that initiative. And that's where I think it's so important that students are realistic in terms of what their needs are and what their why is. And they can, there is a college out there that can support them in terms of meeting their goals and still supporting any mental health needs that they may have. And so I just think that for all of us, for parents as well, it's, kind of stepping back and forefronting that student in terms of what their needs are going to be and making sure that wherever they go off to college, that they're going to be able to meet those needs that they have, and that will best support them in thriving there.
Thank you.
Maureen, I know that this would be a whole different 45-minute conversation
Mm-hmm.
around paying for college and, frankly, why does college cost so much? And there's a lot of answers to that question. I mean, you can talk about state appropriation reduction and other things for publics, but honestly, a big part of college costs and why there's been an escalation does center, to an extent at least, on the support systems that surround students. And whether that be, mental health, whether that be overall, I mean, you're hiring a decent number of people who often have advanced degrees and therefore paying them to support students. And that is part of rising college costs, not the full reason, but that's generally a good thing. And it is an expectation that both parents and students have. And so, what comes as a result of those expectations sometimes is an increased cost. But that's important because it leads to retention, it leads to graduation, it leads to student performance and general student health. So I know that's a whole different webinar for a different time, but I do think it's correlated to the conversation. Plus, I feel like I dodged the question. I was just trying to help Pamela a little bit there.
Unmute. We're going to David, and I'm going to read a question that a reader wrote here, and I'm going to put two of them together because they're both great questions. So the first parent's question is, my student has great grades, AP classes, SAT scores, not many extracurricular activities. Can he get into a good school like your school?
I don't know. That's my answer to almost everything, is I don't know. Just because I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I don't know how many people apply, what they'll be like, etc. I think he'll be able to get into a strong school, yes, but it's hard to guess where a student will be able to get in. My son, who went to tech, when he was in his senior year, he said, I'm thinking about applying to MIT. And he was strong, I mean, very strong academically and otherwise, but I'm like, one, understand the challenges. Again, that's the one where it's 5% or less probably get admitted. Are you wanting to go there if you get in? No. So why bother? Choose places that you'll feel comfortable and go there. In saying that, both Rick and I will probably agree, and Pamela as well, that the first thing that colleges will look at as far as admissions is going to be academics. We want to make sure that the student is going to, one, be successful here, be able to get out in 4 or 5 years or however, graduate, go on to a good job. We want them to be successful academically. And the best indicators of that are always going to be, how did you do your last 4 years? What did you do in the classroom here means, what are you going to do here? And so that is a big key. But beyond that, we also want to say, how are you going to impact our community? Community is a big word, and all of us use it. And you even see it in high school, that you want students who are going to not only be good students, but also bring something that they can add to their high school community and be a positive impact on others and help out. We want to see that as well. It doesn't mean that you have to join XY club or have X amount of activities. What we're looking at is going to be not as much breadth, but depth and why. I'm not going to say, oh, you need to do X club. Do whatever club you feel like you want to be a part of, or part-time work, or XYZ. Do what you feel is driving you to do things and is a passion of yours, but do it well. Do it so that you, and by doing well, I don't mean, oh, get all the trophies. It's not that. It's be a part of it. My daughter was not quite as active as some others, but that's because she spent 18 hours a week in a dance company, and she was dedicated to that for 7, 8+ years. And it showed that she had a passion, that she did it, that she was had some supporting roles, that everybody needs to be a part of the team, but also she might have had a few lead roles, etc. And so we want to see both, but definitely academics come first. But again, go into it knowing, wow, there's a lot of different, things that people will look at. And Rick and I'll probably look at a file differently at sometimes because there are different, every institution might have a little bit different institutional goal or point of view. We will probably, look a little bit differently from tech as far as AP calculus or post math calculus, classes, etc. Because his students are a little bit more heavy on engineering or ones that might need it. Ours, we still have that in many areas, but also I'm not going to say, oh, here's a student in sociology and I really need them to take calculus in high school. Probably not. No, not unless you're suddenly saying, and I want to be, an engineer as well. So that's a long-winded answer, but hopefully it wound its way to making sense in some ways.
Okay, we only have a few minutes left and I've got a bunch of questions. So I want you to answer them as quickly as possible. Rick, I'm going to start with you. I think it's an easy one because I think we know the answer. This parent says, do UGA and Tech recalculate GPA? So kids are on an even playing field. Some public schools add 7 points to final grades for honors and AP, whereas private schools do not. I think
We
that
do not. We do
Yeah,
not
so-
recalculate. We do not recalculate. We trust the high school to determine their grading scale and to issue the grades. And then we review students within their school cohort and the curriculum in order to make our admission decisions.
So you don't recalculate, because I understand most schools don't add extras to honors. That surprised me to read that for public schools. Is that true that they?
Some do, some don't. The UGA does recalculate, but that's because we want a little bit more of a standard GPA, but that's because we have a different review process. And it doesn't broken out by private or public. Some publics do, some publics don't, XYZ. So it's more just the choice of the school. We have a lot of schools now who are giving us transcripts of both the unweighted and weighted grade by that teacher. And we really like that because it both says, oh, for the schools that just look at weighted work, hey, there you got it. For those who really want to add our own weight and do it like everybody else, we're good. So,
Okay. Pamela, my next question to you, and a brief answer. I think this one works for a brief answer. Your best advice on when the college search should start. Is it 8th grade? Is it 9th grade? When should it sort of take off?
9th grade. That's when it matters. And it's not about the colleges in 9th and 10th grade. It's about the teen and developing those life skills that they'll use to thrive in college.
Okay. And I'm going to ask this question to David and then to Rick. Describe briefly what sort of applications make you understand great application, this kid gets it, and what applications make you cringe?
That's not a short answer. Probably I'd more go, there's a lot of different things that come into it, but more essays. I would say, even though they're not going to be, oh my gosh, this has changed the decision completely, it adds a little bit more. And you just see such variation in the essays, where some students understand, hey, I'm just trying to share more about myself, how I communicate. They do it in a way that is sensory, as far as saying, hey, let me take you into my story. And others, it's like just dictation and the longest words possible. And let me tell you 80% about the big game and 20% about me. No, it should be the reverse. And
Right.
Some people get that, some people don't. I compare it to telling jokes, and you want to communicate well, you want to have good opening line and punchline. You want to get people to feel it. It's not like an aquatic waterfowl walked into an establishment. It's a duck walked into a bar, So that's the best thing I can say.
All right, I'll take another part of the application and answer both on this. I think the students who take advantage of the application and do the best job when you're looking at that extracurricular side are ones who don't assume we know what a lot of the acronyms mean within their high school, and they kind of explain a little bit more about what it is they've been involved with. So they get that, we are doing our best to understand context and understand and appreciate what they've been involved with, but they need to help us do that. So the converse of that is the cringe part, where a student just says baseball and then a bunch of acronyms that might be really impressive if we knew what that meant. but we don't. And so they're kind of wasting that opportunity to tell us more about something that probably means a lot to them.
You're muted.
Maureen, you're muted.
I'm trying to do that because my cat is snoring right next to me and she's too old to put away. She has to stay right at my feet. Anyway, just got a good question. Do you, schools that don't rank, does that matter to you? This is someone asking. I thought we'd hit that real quick. If you could give me an answer on that. Well, the question disappeared, but if they don't have any rankings to compare them with their cohorts, is that a big deal?
Not for us. The majority of schools actually don't rank.
Is that true for UGA as well?
Yeah, we don't care. I mean, besides number 1 and 2 in the class, as far as we do something special for them, ranking really doesn't matter. It's
Okay.
Everybody does it differently, so no.
Yeah. I appreciate all your time. If you could just quickly, we'll start with Pamela, tell people how to find you online, because you are not in Atlanta. You are in the great Midwest.
The great Midwest, I am, but I will be in Atlanta soon. So I can be reached on LinkedIn as the Education Doctor, also on Facebook and Twitter, the Education Doctor. And my email address is info@compasscollegeadvisory.com.
Okay, and with that is in the chat. David, do you want to be reached by people? Do admissions people actually want people to find them?
Depends upon the month. So I feel like I should give Pamela my stuff over there as far as med school, because of doctor. My name's David Russell Graves, so it's Dr. Graves, but I'm not a doctor. I'm a doctor on Twitter. Dr. Graves at Dr. Graves UGA is my Twitter account. If you go to the admissions website for UGA and just click on the blog link, I've been writing that for 10 years. I try and answer questions as much as possible. If you ask a question now, I'll probably answer it. Well, you just took 45 minutes away, but I'll probably answer it in about 30 minutes. And we try and help, but also know that we sometimes have a life of our own, so we can't always be reached. And if you reach out to somebody, be polite.
Okay. And Rick, I know you travel a lot. How can they reach you?
Sure. On Twitter, it is at Clark, the number 2 college. But if you're more interested in following Georgia Tech admission, then we are at GT admission on pretty much every platform. And then also we write a regular blog as well, which people can find from the Georgia Tech admission website. Okay.
I want to thank the 3 of you. You were fabulous. I wish I had listened to a panel like this when any of my 4 children were going to college. And I hope that the listeners enjoyed it. Send them questions. I'm sure they'll help you. I can honestly testify the UGA admissions blog is great. Pamela's website is great. I listened to her podcast today, and Rick's book is great. Pamela, I'm going to read your book now that I know you have one. Anyway, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you all.